Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast for intermediate to advanced level learners of English. On today's episode of Thinking in English, I'm going to explain some of the most famous insults in political history. From Dotard to malignant cancerous tumour, let's learn how countries and politicians like to describe each other. Check out the blog, thinkinginenglish.blog, for a full transcript of today's episode, and check out my Instagram page, Thinking in English Podcast, for more excellent content. Last month, I released a podcast on Boris Johnson's eccentric language and especially his use of a wide variety of insults. From gibbering rictus to mutton-headed, there is no shortage of insults Johnson has previously used. And if you want to learn some more, feel free to check out that episode. Insults and insulting language are not unusual in politics and international relations. I recently read an Economist article titled The Beastly History of Diplomatic Insults, which talked about a few times throughout history where different countries and politicians have insulted each other. Insult can be both a noun and a verb in English. An insult is a disrespectful or scornfully abusive remark or act. For example, I recorded an episode on Boris Johnson's famous insults. To insult means to speak to or treat with disrespect, such as, "He insulted me last night." The Economist article detailed many of the most famous insults in history, but didn't really explain what they meant and why they were used. So, this episode is going to introduce you to some of the content of that article, but also go further in defining and giving context to the vocabulary included. You don't need to read the Economist article, but if you want to, I'll leave a link in my blog. The mute with the deaf. There have been a lot of stories in newspapers and online recently about insults, especially in the UK's media. Why? Well, earlier this month, the UK Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, visited Moscow for discussions with the Russian government. There has been very high tension between Russia and the Western world over Ukraine. So the British government hoped that Truss would be able to reduce the anger and pressure. But it didn't work. Instead, the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, described the conversation as a conversation of the mute and the deaf. What does this mean? Well, mute is an old and now slightly offensive term to describe people who do not have the ability to speak. I don't recommend using this to describe people with such a disability, as it is considered to be offensive. Deaf refers to people with the inability to hear or impaired hearing. So, a conversation of the mute and the deaf is a conversation between someone who can't speak and someone who can't hear. Obviously, this would pose challenges, although now we do have technology to help this process. So, Mr. Lavrov was suggesting his conversation with the British government was impossible, full of confusion, and perhaps a waste of time. Morons. Liz Truss is not the only person to be insulted by the Russian Foreign Minister, Mr. Lavrov. During a meeting with Saudi Arabian officials in 2015, a microphone recorded him describing the Saudis as morons. What does moron mean? A moron is a foolish or stupid person. Moron along with idiot and imbecile, used to be technical words in the early 20th century, used in science, education, and medicine. And they used to refer to people with intellectual disabilities. However, we no longer use moron in this sense, as it is offensive. Instead, moron just refers to someone you think is being stupid or foolish. I forgot my keys last week when I went out. I felt like a moron. People who leave their trash in the street are morons. It still smells of sulphur. Perhaps the king of insults was Venezuela's president, Hugo Chavez, who served for 14 years. He was most famous for his regular insults of the US and then President George W. Bush. In 2006, Chavez made a speech at the United Nations, just one day after George Bush. As soon as it was Chavez's time to speak, he said, "The devil came here yesterday, and it smells of sulphur still today. This table that I am now standing in front of." What does it mean? What does "it still smells of sulphur" mean? Well, as you can guess from Chavez's whole insult, it is related to the devil. Sulphur is the smell of burning rock and dangerous volcanoes. It kind of smells like rotten eggs. The Christian devil and hell are associated with burning and heat as a punishment. So, over the years, sulphur, the smell of burning rock, has come to be connected with the devil. So, Chavez was giving more images and more insults against George Bush by describing him as the devil. "You are an ignoramus. You are a donkey, Mr. Danger. You are a coward, a killer, a genocide, an alcoholic, a drunk, a liar." This is another Chavez insult directed at George Bush and taken from a TV speech in 2006. "You are an ignoramus. You are a donkey, Mr. Danger. You are a coward, a killer, a genocide, an alcoholic, a drunk, a liar." Now, this is a long and complicated insult, so let's break it down. An ignoramus is a utterly ignorant person who doesn't understand or know anything. I'm a complete ignoramus when it comes to computers. A donkey is a horse-like animal, but it used to refer, or it is used to refer, to a stupid or obstinate person. My friends called me a donkey when I missed their plans. A coward is a person who is not brave and is too eager to avoid danger, difficulty, or pain. People online who leave anonymous insults on social media are cowards. A killer is someone who kills another person, usually on purpose. For example, police are searching for the killer. Genocide is not an adjective like the previous words, but a noun. Genocide is the murder of a whole group of people, especially a whole nation, race, or religious group. An alcoholic is a person who is unable to stop drinking alcohol, especially if they drink every day and in large amounts. A drunk is another way of saying alcoholic. For instance, he used to be an alcoholic and drunk, but he's recovering now. And a liar is someone who tells lies regularly and is not trustworthy. If someone is a liar, you can't trust anything they say. So, Mr. Chavez's insult: "You are an ignoramus. You are a donkey, Mr. Danger. You are a coward, a killer, a genocide, an alcoholic, a drunk, a liar." Well, hopefully now you can understand it a little better. A boy in short trousers. 20 years ago, Robert Mugabe, the then president of Zimbabwe, described British Prime Minister Tony Blair as a boy in short trousers. Why is this an insult? Well, actually, it's a combination of two different insults. Wearing short pants or in short pants is a common insult used to suggest someone is very young or inexperienced. Pants is the American way of saying trousers. Traditionally, upper class English families, including the royal family, would dress their sons in shorts or short trousers until they reached a certain age. In fact, if you ever see a picture of Prince George, you will notice he is always in shorts and never wearing trousers. This culture is not just limited to the UK. Other countries, elementary schools, for example, often require children to wear shorts at school, not trousers. Similarly, boy is a common way of insulting someone by suggesting they are too young and inexperienced. China actually uses the term boy a lot to dismiss the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And in the USA, boy also has a racial or racist meaning. So by calling Tony Blair a boy in short trousers, Robert Mugabe was suggesting he was far too young and inexperienced. Rocket Man and Dotard. One of the most famous recent examples of international insults came between Donald Trump and North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong un. Donald Trump gave Kim Jong un the nickname Rocket Man due to his desire to test weapons, fire missiles, and launch rockets. In fact, Trump reportedly sent copies of Elton John's Rocket Man CD to Kim. In response, the North Koreans described Trump as a dotard. At the time, this was such a rarely used and uncommon word that most people, most native English speakers, had to pick up a dictionary to check the meaning. A dotard is an old person, especially one who is confused and weak. A malignant, cancerous tumour. The final insult I'll talk about today was tweeted by the Iranian Supreme Leader in 2018. He described Israel as a malignant, cancerous tumour. Iran and Israel have a long and bitter rivalry, so it's no surprise they issue such a strong insult. Malignant is an adjective suggesting something or someone wants to do harm. And in reference to disease, malignant is almost always used to refer to harmful cancer or growths. The adjective cancerous means cancer, of course, and a tumour is a mass of diseased cells that might cause illness. So Iran was describing Israel as a harmful disease. But in response, Israel tweeted back memes from the movie Mean Girls. So here is today's final thought. On today's episode of Thinking in English, I wanted to define some of the most famous insults in political and diplomatic history. Using a recent Economist article as inspiration, I tried to explain what the insults meant and how to use them. However, not all insults are verbal. Turkey has been involved in two insulting controversies about chairs at international meetings. First, Turkey was annoyed after Israel put the Turkish ambassador on a low sofa during a meeting, instead of giving him a real chair. And then the Turkish government did the exact same thing to the European Commission president by putting her on a sofa instead of a chair. And Vladimir Putin famously introduced his massive dog to Angela Merkel of Germany. Merkel is well known to be scared of dogs. What is your favorite insult? Leave an insult from your country in the comments on Spotify or on the blog, or send it to me on Instagram. As long as you're not insulting me, that is, I guess.